Everyone, good afternoon. I hope I'm audible. So let's start today's session. My name is Kajal Kachana. I'm a PMRF research scholar for the course Post-Pathogen Interaction Immunology. And today we are at week 12, that is the last week of this course. And the material till week 11 is already available on the YouTube, so you can check it out there. And today is the last session and last class of this course. I hope this entire course duration was helpful for you and you have learned something new. So, if you have any doubt or any confusion or problem from any of the previous weeks, you can let me know so that we can take that questions and the problem. So, this was the complete outline of this course, and currently we are at the last week, and today we will be solving the assignment for both week 11 as well as week 12. So, in the last class, we have learned about the viral infections, where we have seen about influenza virus, dengue virus, Zika virus, and other arboviral diseases. And also, we have seen about the cold and flu. So, I hope you have seen that video. And in the last class, we have started about the bacterial infection, and we have learned how our innate and adaptive immune system are responding to the bacterial infection. So today we will be learning about the details of the bacterial infection by taking examples of different type of bacteria. So the first one here is the Mycobacterium, which is a very popular bacteria and it causes the Mycobacterium tuberculosis disease. It is a rod-shaped bacteria and it do not form the spores and it resists the decolorization by acid and alcohol wash that we will learn in the upcoming slides. And it is a acid fast bacteria and it is in hydrophobic nature and it resists to chemical agents because of the hydrophobic nature, because of the presence of certain type of components of in its cell wall of mycobacterium. So we will learn about in the coming slides. And it is also resistant to drying so that it can survive in the dried sputum for a longer time, which is a major way of how to spread the infection of the mycobacterium. Because if a infected patient have like thrown the sputum anywhere or if have something is there from the infected patient, then even after drying, the mycobacterium can be alive in that the dried sputum and it can spread infection to the healthy individuals. So if we talk about the pathogenicity of mycobacterium, then there are four particular species of mycobacterium. First one is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It causes the tuberculosis. Second one is Mycobacterium leprae. It causes leprosy. Third one is Mycobacterium avium intracellulari. It affects the immunocompromised people. And the fourth one is Mycobacterium bovis. It causes the tuberculosis in cattle as well as humans. And there are certain non-tuberculous mycobacteria, which are the mycobacteria other than Mycobacterium tuberculosis and Mycobacterium leprae. And these are Mycobacterium gansai and Mycobacterium fortatum. So these are different type of strain or species of Mycobacterium. So if we talk about how it spread the infection, so then this mycobacterium is known to initiate the infection most efficiently in the lower lung through small aerosol droplets that contain only 1 to 3 bacteria. Like only 1 to 3 bacteria is responsible for causing this infection. This Mycobacterium tuberculosis appears to lack the classical virulence factors, like as we have studied about so many type of virulence factors in our previous lectures. So it lack any specific virulence factor, and they use the host macrophages to traverse host mucosal barriers to sterile sites deeply in the body. And after the host, immune evasion, modulation, and exploitation are the trump cards of the pathogenic mycobacterium. Like they can completely evade the or modulate the human host immune system. And this tuberculosis disease is highly contagious and it often transferred via the airborne type of mode of transmission because this mycobacterium is spread through the droplets of the infected patient to the healthy individuals. And but only the active pulmonary TB is contagious, like it will only spread the infection. And if we talk about the structure of the mycobacterium, or mainly speaking about the cell wall or the outer layer of the mycobacterium, then mycobacterium cell envelope is divided into like four different portions, one, two, three, and four that we will see one by one. So the first one is MOM, that is mycobacterial outer membrane. Just let us stuck. I'm so sorry it got stuck in between. Yeah, so let's continue. We were talking about the mycobacterium cell envelope. Like mycobacterium contain like four different portions. First one is like mycobacterium outer membrane. It is made up of mainly made up of the mycolic acid, which is a key component of this outer membrane. And the second one is AGP, that is arabinogalactan peptidoglycan layer. This is the here second layer. The third one is your periplasm, and third and the fourth last one is mycobacterium inner membrane. So there are like four different portions of the cell envelope of an mycobacterium. And this AGP contain the peptidoglycan layer, which is also very important for the mycobacterium survival and in transmission of infection. And the third one is periplasm. It is mainly rich in like this lipoproteins and lipomannan. And the fourth one is mycobacterium inner membrane, which is MIM. So unlike the most gram-positive bacteria, these bacilli augment their peptidoglycan wall with an extensive array of complex lipidoglycans, which reflects the necessity to resist desiccation in soil environment. So that's why they survive for a longer time. And the thick waxy cell wall and the ability to catabolize fatty acids seem to be useful pre-adaptations to parasitic extension. So there are some peculiar features of the cell envelope of an mycobacterium. So there is a tuberculin skin test, which is a Montauk's tuberculin skin test. It's also called as TST. It is also called as TST. So it is for checking whether a person is initially infected with a mycobacterium or not. So this test involves the intradermal injection of purified protein derivatives. These are the PPD, protein purified derivatives into the skin, and the result depends on the size of the raised hard area or the swelling, as you can see here in this image. Like they are injecting something into the skin, and after some time it is getting like swell up, and they are measuring this like how much is the size of that raised area. And this test can be positive even after 4 to 6 weeks of infection. So, if a test is positive, then this means the patient's body was infected with the TB bacteria. So, additional tests are also required to determine if the person has a latent TB infection or it have the TB disease. But if the skin test is negative, then this means the patient's body did not react to the test, and the latent TB infection or TB disease is not likely there. So this is a way of checking if you are exposed to MTB or not. And there is a stain known as the acid fast stain. In the initial slides, there was like this is acid fast bacteria. So for checking that, there is a acid fast stain, and it was given by Zell Nelson. That's why it is also called as Zell Nelson acid fast stain. So in this test, what they initially do, they take a glass slide and put some culture over there, and then they apply the first stain, that is the primary stain, which is carbofuscin, and it will give the pink color to all the microbes present onto the that slide. Like here you can see both acid fast positive and negative bacteria are pink colored. Then what we do, we give the heat to the slide, like we heat fix the sample, like application of heat. In this, what will happen, the both the bacteria will be positive, but on the next step, when we decolorize the sample using the acid alcohol, then the acid fast negative bacteria will get colorless, and the acid fast positive will remain pink colored. Then in the fourth step, when we give the counter stain, that is the methylene blue, then what we observe that the acid fast negative bacteria will take up the blue color and positive bacteria will take up the pink color. So this is a way of differentiating how whether the sample contains your acid fast bacteria or not. And this is because of the presence of the like mycolic acid in the cell envelope of the MTB. Because of that, it will give the color. So from this, we can check whether any patient have the MTB positive culture or not. And the next one is interferon gamma release assay, that is also known as the IGRA test. In this, what they do is it is a blood based test used to detect the latent TB by measuring the immune response to Mycobacterium tuberculosis specific antigens. So, in this test, what they do, the first step is antigen presentation. The blood samples containing the antigen presenting cells are incubated with tuberculosis specific antigens. Like these APCs are present incubated with the MTB specific antigens, which are these antigens. Then, if these antigens are not present in BCG vaccine strain or most non tuberculous bacteria, then it will increase the test specificity. In the second step, what they check, like they check the cytokine production. Like if a person has been infected with MTB, then memory T cells recognize the antigens and release the interferon gamma as a part of the immune response. And in the third step, they quantify the released interferon gamma. By these two methods, they quantify that how much interferon gamma is released there. So on the basis of this, they check whether there are MTB specific antigens present in the blood sample or not. And this IGRA is specific for detecting the latent TB infection, not the active disease. Like the interferon gamma release assay or IGRA, it will detect the latent TB infection. And how TB spread, as you are already familiar, and we have also discussed in the last class about such type of mode of transmission of the infection, that it is airborne transmission. So, like this TB spread through the air. When a person with active pulmonary TB, it will cough or sneeze or speak or anything from his or her mouth will come out in the air, and it can go and travel to the healthy person also. So, when this healthy person will breathe in those droplets, those contaminated droplets, then it will get infected with the TB. And we talk about the pathogenesis of MTB. Then, if we see the stepwise how this MTB is, like what is the pathogenesis of this MTB, then first step is like inhalation and entry of the MTB. When MTB are inhaled and they reach to the alveoli region of the lungs, they are first encountered by the alveolar macrophages here, alveolar macrophages and the dendritic cells and monocytes. Like these are here, these pathogens enter inside the alveolar region of the lung. Then they will interact with the alveolar macrophages, monocytes, and dendritic cells. Then what will happen? These macrophages will engulf the bacteria and form a phagosome. And this, however, this MTB also survive by inhibiting the phagosome or lysosome fusion, which enables it to multiply inside the macrophages. Like it can also inhibit the fusion of phagosome and lysosome. Then in the next step, the granuloma will form. This immune response is triggered by dendritic cells, which present antigens to the T cells. And the activated T cells and B cells, they will accumulate at the site of infection. And the host immune system forms a granuloma, which is a compact organized structure to like for preventing the infection. And the central core of this granuloma will contain the central core will contain the infected macrophages. And the surrounding layer here, this will be a B cell, T cell, and the fibroblasts. So this is a granuloma. So it will form a wall-like structure surrounding the infected pathogen so that it is not able to spread in surroundings. So there are like two type of granulomas. This first one is cellular granuloma. Second one is necrotic granuloma. The cellular granuloma is formed during the initial containment. It is composed of immune cells with minimal tissue damage. While the necrotic granuloma is, if the infection persists, then the center undergoes necrosis. Like this will rupture off and it will potentially allow the bacteria to escape and spread. So there are these two type of granuloma. See the detailed structure of the granuloma. These granuloma are also called the hiding spot for MTB because this MTB can enter here inside and they can hide off from other immune cells. So there are different type of cells present inside a granuloma. Like first one here we can see is Th1 cell. It promotes the macrophage activation via interferon gamma. The second one here is this Treg cells, that is T regulatory cells. It suppresses the immune activation to prevent the excessive tissue damage. The third one is NK cells, that is natural killer cells. They will kill the infected macrophages. The next one are the B cells. They will support the antigen presentation and antibody production. And the next here are some macrophages are also there. They will engulf the bacilli and they will become the infected. And there are this epithelioid macrophages. They are the specialized macrophages forming the inner layer of the granuloma. And there are also some form cells. They are the lipid loaded macrophages and they support the bacillary survival. And also there are some disjunct cells. They are the fused macrophages and characteristics of the granuloma. There are also some apoptotic macrophages. They will indicate the host cell death and they may also release the bacilli. And there are some neutrophils. These are the early responders to the tissue damage. There are dendritic cells. They will act as the antigen presenting cells for the T cells. And they will initiate the adaptive immune response. So there are different type of cells in the granuloma, and each cell have a different action. So there are some drugs like first line and second line drugs for the TB infection. So I think this you can check it out from the lecture video. Like each type of drug have a different mode of action on stopping the infection. There are first line of drug and second line of drug for TB. And there are also drug resistance TB, like on a later stage, the MTB can also become drug resistance. So these drug resistance TB can occur when the drugs used to treat TB are misused or mismanaged. Like some people do not complete the full course of TB treatment, and also some of the healthcare providers prescribe the wrong treatment, like the wrong dose or the duration for how much time the patient should take the medicine. And also the drugs for proper treatment are not available, and some drugs may be of poor quality. These all the factors may lead to the drug resistance TB. So these were the bacterial infection, and now we will move forward to the fungal infection. So, as you are already aware, that this fungi play a major role in many of the food products production, like in food industry, like for the production of these fermented foods and some antibiotics like the penicillin and other items. And the fungal disease are known as the mycosis, and they are the mainly opportunistic. Like all the time, they will not cause the infection, but at some time they can become opportunistic and cause the infection. Like mainly, they will cause infection in the immunocompromised individuals. And this fungal infection could also be like superficial, cutaneous, subcutaneous, or deep in the tissue or the systemic. Superficial means like it will be only at your hair or skin or at outermost layer of your body. And cutaneous, it can be at your epidermis, nails, or hair shaft. And at subcutaneous, it can be your beneath the skin, that is at your dermis or subcutaneous tissue. And deep or systemic infection can be in your internal organs like your lung, and your central nervous system can also get infected by the fungi. So if you talk about the morphogenesis and virulence of the fungi, then we can see that there are the dimorphic fungi or the opportunistic fungi. So how they cause the infection? As dimorphic fungi, it will exist in two different forms depending on the temperature. If the temperature is at around like 25 degrees Celsius, then it can exist in the form of the mold or the mycelial. And if the temperature is at 37 degrees Celsius, then it can exist in the form of yeast. The opportunistic fungi, they are the part of the normal flora or the environment, but they can cause infection in the immunocompromised patients. Like all the time, they will be not infectious. However, both innate and adaptive immune system respond to the fungal pathogens. Like all the immune cells of the body are responding to the fungal infection, and also the cytokines and like your interleukins, interferons are also involved in the fungal. They are also involved in response to the fungal infection, and antibodies are also produced towards your fighting from a fungal infection. So both your innate and adaptive immune systems are working together for protection from fungal pathogens. WHO have given a fungal priority list, which the first one is like critical priority group, which contains the your Cryptococcus, Neoformans, Aspergillus fumigators, and your Candida auris and your Candida albicans. Like these are the critical priority group, like they are the most infectious. And the critical priority group means they will cause the high mortality, and they are the drug resistance, and they are also like there are very limited diagnostic and treatment options for these type of infections. Your this Cryptococcus neoformans will cause the cryptococcal meningitis, and this Aspergillus fumigatus, it also causes the invasive aspergillosis. And the Candida auris, it will also cause very highly motile diseases, like patients are very difficult to survive. I think you might have seen all the details of different type of infections from the lecture video, so I will quickly skip this and move to the question and answer parts. About aspergillosis and cryptococcosis, you might have seen from the lecture video. Then the second list is your high priority group. First one was your critical priority, and the second is a high priority group. These also contain few of the fungi species. Third one is a medium priority group. So there are different microbes assigned to different groups. And your last week material contain about the parasitic infection. So like there are different type of human parasites. So we have seen viral infection in the last week lecture, and today we have seen about the bacterial and fungal infection, and now we will see the parasitic infection. These protozoa are the unicellular eukaryotes, and they replicate within the host cell, and they are classified on the basis of their means of location. The first one is the flagellates, which contain the parasites like Trypanosoma and Leishmania. As the name suggests, flagellates, they will use the flagella for the movement. And the second one is amoeba. You might have seen in your 10th or 12th class biology about Entamoeba histolytica. It uses this type of the pseudopodia for movement. These are the pseudopodia for engulfment and for movement. And these flagellates will have a long flagella for the movement, like you can see in the case of Trypanosoma leishmania. Then third one is your sporozoa. These are the non-motile. They contain like this Toxoplasma gondii and Plasmodium species. These are the non-motile. And the fourth category is your ciliates. They will use the cilia. The cilia are the hair-like projections for movement. Yeah, this Sporozoa is non-motile. Rest all are motile. Then the second group is helminths or worm organisms. They are multicellular. They infect the humans but can reproduce on their own. They have the two phyla. First one is nematode, which are roundworms. The second one is platyhelminths. These are flatworms. So these nematodes, they are the roundworms, and these platyhelminths are the flatworms. To take the example of the malaria disease, then it is caused by the protozoan pathogens of the Plasmodium species. And these Plasmodiums are the single-celled eukaryotic organisms that belong to the phylum Epicomplexa, which is named for the apical complex that is involved in the post-cell invasion. And the initial symptoms of malaria include fever, headache, shivering, vomiting, and if not treated early, it can, depending on the species responsible for the disease, it can cause severe anemia or metabolic acidosis and heart failure or burden on kidney or cerebral malaria. And it can also lead to the death. So this is that much severe infection if not treated properly on the early stage. If we talk about the Plasmodium species, then there are five human infective Plasmodium species. First one is Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium ovale, Plasmodium malariae, and Plasmodium knowlesi. Uh, each type of species have a different type of role in causing the infection, and their mode of pathogenesis is different. That you can check from the lecture video in detail. If we talk about the life cycle of how this is surviving and spreading from one host to other, this is the life cycle of the. So if you see the Plasmodium life cycle, then it combine human and mosquito stage. Like there are two different stages. First one is the human liver stage, and the other one is mosquito stage. In mosquito stage, that is it's a sporogonic cycle. The mosquito takes a blood meal and it will ingest the gametocytes into the infected human during taking up the blood meal. And the fertilization will occur in the mosquito gut. Like these male microgametes fertilize with female macrogametes to form a zygote. Like here you can see the mosquito will take a blood meal and it will inject the sporozoite there. And after the fertilization, this the oocyte will rupture and it will release the sporozoites again. And these sporozoites will migrate to the mosquito salivary gland and they will be ready for infecting the other humans. So this life cycle here that will fuse with male and female gamete, it will form the oocyte and this oocyte will again get ruptured and it will be traveling to the mosquito salivary gland, which can infect other humans. And if we see the human life cycle, Then it will happen in the liver. This mosquito bite will inject the sporozoites, and this sporozoites will infect the liver cells. And this will develop into the schizont. And the schizons will rupture and release the merozoites into the bloodstream. Here they will release the merozoites into the bloodstream. And in the human blood stage, the first one was liver stage, and when the merozoites have reached to the blood, then in the blood stage, these merozoites will infect the RBCs, and they will develop through stages like from ring form to trophozoites and again schizoids, and it will get matured, and the schizoids will again it will get ruptured and release more merozoites, and again the cycle will continue here in the blood. So from this you can see how infected mosquito will form more type of these sporozoites, and in the human also, human liver and human blood are also involved in the life cycle completion of this plasmodium species. If we talk about the host response to plasmodium, then the innate immunity will provide the initial defense against infection when pathogens are first encountered, which is followed by the development of specific antibody secreting B lymphocytes. Initially, innate immunity will try to control the infection. And for the children under the age of 14, they have the lowest immunity to malaria as they produce low amount of antibodies against merozoites form of plasmodium. So, like both your innate and adaptive immune system basically are involved in fighting with the plasmodium infection. And there are drugs against the plasmodium. The names you can check it out from the presentation. There is one condition known as the African sleeping sickness. I think you might have heard about this somewhere. This disease is caused by the protozoan parasite, which is Trypanosoma brucei, and it is a flagellated protozoan and it causes chronic and debilitating disease. It is characterized by its unique mitochondrial DNA and it's lived exclusively as an extracellular parasite. And there are like two mode of transmission. First one is saliva type, and the second one is fecal contamination. It can be transmitted by these, and it is transmitted via the bite of the fly. Like this T-Sex fly, which is a Glossina species, it is responsible for causing this, for transmitting this disease. And again, if we see the life cycle of this African trypanosomiasis, then it also have like two stages. First is mammalian stage, another one is this T-Sex fly stage. It will complete its life cycle in two different hosts. Like previously, we have seen about the plasmodium. It complete the life cycle inside two hosts, that is mosquito and the human. Here, in the place of mosquito, this T-Sex fly are involved. You can check this out from the lecture video. If you have any doubt, you can ask or you can. So, if we quickly take the week 11 assignment questions. The due date was 9th of April, so I hope you might have already submitted this. So let's discuss quickly the questions of week 11. The first, just a minute. So the first question was, which of the following statements about endotoxin are true? The answer to this question is like they are components of the outer membrane of the gram negative bacteria, of the outer membrane of the gram negative bacteria, and they are stable at very high temperature and they can trigger fever and inflammatory response. So these are the correct statements about the endotoxins. Because these endotoxins are the components of the lipopolysaccharide layer, which is present in the outer membrane of the gram-negative bacteria, this LPS layer. And they are not found in gram-positive bacteria. They are not secreted by live bacteria. They are stable at high temperature and they cannot get converted to toxoids. And there is no role of plasmid in that. The second question was, which cells are present in granuloma in a Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection? This we have seen in previous slides that macrophages Th1 and neutrophils are involved, are present in the granuloma of MTB infection. The third question was, which immune response is primarily activated in response to extracellular bacterial infection? So here in the case of they are talking about the extracellular bacterial infection. So in this case, the both Th2 cell-mediated immunity and the complement system are involved. The fourth question was, which activity is disrupted by pyrazinamide, leading to its low anti-tuberculosis effect? So here the membrane transport activity is disrupted by this drug. The fifth question was, the virulence factor of Bacillus anthracis include all of the following except diphtheria toxin, because they are talking about the virulence factor of Bacillus anthracis. The sixth question was, what makes Mycobacterium tuberculosis infection a more challenge? So it develops multi-drug resistance, so which complicates the therapy. Yes, we have seen that it can undergo the drug resistance with both the first line and second line of drugs. So it can develop a multi-drug resistance. So it is a major challenge of the MTB infection. The next question is, what is the difference between exotoxins and endotoxins? Your exotoxins are the proteins released into the environment, while the endotoxins are the part of your bacterial cell wall. So these are the difference between exo and endo. Very common, suggested from the name itself, exo and endotoxin. What is the limitation of the Montex test in tuberculosis screening? It can cross react with the non-tuberculous mycobacterium. So you cannot differentiate between whether it is mycobacterium tuberculosis or non-tuberculous mycobacterium. The next question was, what does the formation of granuloma in response to tuberculosis infection indicate? Formation of granuloma. It indicates the body's attempt to contain the infection. And the last question was which of the following statements are true regarding bacterial regulation and pathogenicity? Regarding bacterial regulation and pathogenicity. So the correct options are bacteria can exist in both free living and pathogenic states. Environmental signals can trigger changes in bacterial growth modes. The coevolution of bacteria and the host immune system affects the infection dynamics, and the secretory IgA play a role in preventing the bacterial colonization. So these are the statements true for the bacterial regulation and pathogenicity. So these were your questions from the week 11 assignment. And for the week 12, the deadline is still there for 16th of April. So the final answer key is not released. I would like to discuss only the tentative answers as from the lecture video. So you can check it out. And I request you to cross check the answers once the final answer key is provided from the NPTEL. So the first question for week 12 assignment is in the context of the malaria transmission, which of the following statements accurately describe the role of the sporozoites? So they are talking about in the context of malaria transmission, which of the following statements accurately describe the role of the sporozoites? So if you correct properly read the life cycle of the this malaria transmission, then you will get to know the role of sporozoites is to it is the form that invades the liver cell after being inoculated by the mosquito. Like the sporozoite is the form that will invade the liver cells after being inoculated by the mosquito. So I think this is the correct answer. You can cross check it again. The second question is which complement pathway is particularly important against fungal infection? So for fungal infection, both your alternative and lectin pathways are involved. The third question is which phase of the malaria parasite's life cycle is primarily responsible for causing clinical symptoms in human? Like which phase of the malaria parasitic life cycle is primarily responsible for causing clinical symptoms in humans? So for this case, the erythrocytic cycle is there. The next question is which of the following factors contribute to the evasion of the host immune system by Trypanosoma brucei? So the answer may be your this variant surface glycoprotein switching and the antigenic variations. The fifth question is which of the following is a cause of ringworm infection? Ringworm infection is caused by, we have just recently seen the parasitic infection. It is caused by the fungus. The sixth question is how does prolonged immunosuppression affect the host response? Like prolonged immunosuppression affect the host response. So it will disrupt the multiple immune pathways and will increase the susceptibility. The seventh question is what does the term fungal morphogenesis refer to in the context of virulence? So the fungal morphogenesis, it refers to the changes in the physical structure of fungi that enhance their pathogenicity. Eighth question is salivarian and stercornean modes of transmission are. We have just seen these two modes of transmission in the case of trypanosoma. The ninth question is which Plasmodium species is most commonly associated with severe malaria and high mortality rate? So it is very clear Plasmodium falciparum. because it is most dangerous of the human malarial parasites and is responsible for the majority of severe cases of death. The last question for your week 12 assignment is which statements are true regarding the life cycle and infection process of Trypanosoma brucei. So the correct statements for this are the metacyclic Trypomasticot is injected into humans through the T-cells fly bite. Yes, we have seen this. And the second correct option is the infection progresses through two distinct stages with systemic and neurological symptoms. Yes, correct. And the parasite's genetic adaptability is largely due to its unique mitochondrial DNA. Yes, this is also correct. And the next correct option is the understanding the life cycle is crucial for developing effective control measures. Yes. And the last correct option is the presence of surface glycoprotein variations complicate the immune detection. Yes, this is also correct. We have seen about variant surface glycoproteins and antigenic variations. So these will complicate the immune detection. So these were the questions from your week 12 assignment about the parasites. So you can check these from the lecture video lectures already available from Professor Himanshu Kumar on the NPTEL channel. And also you can go through the lecture material for week 12. And once the final answer key is released, then you are requested to cross check these answers from there. And because this is the last day of this particular course. So I would like to wrap up here. And all the week 12 topics are available on the YouTube channel of NPTEL. You can check it out there. If you have any doubt from any of the previous lectures, then you can drop a comment down the video or you can post it on the discussion forum or you can send me an email regarding that. So I'm happy to discuss that. So I hope these video lectures and the weekly assignment session were helpful for you and you have learned something new. So really thank you for everyone who have joined in the video lectures and the live interactive session and all those who have seen from the YouTube channel. So thank you so much everyone. And I would like to wrap this up here and I would like to end the session. So if you have any doubt, you can ask later or now. It's up to you. So thank you everyone.